And as always, I'm going to drop the link in here in the chat just so we've got it. All right. All right. Does everybody realize that this is the last day of lecture? And Wednesday we're at Nico's.
Yes, I'm very.
That means we kind of made it. We almost made it. We're not all the way out, but we are very close. So, okay, here's what we're doing today. Oh, I need a break. Everybody else needs a break. That's why we got to start on Wednesday. And by the way, Wednesday at 2:30. Wednesday at class time. So don't eat your regular nutritious lunch. Hold tight, and we'll do the factor at Nico's. Let's see. Are there any questions down the line? I tried to go through and double check all the grading stuff. I think it's all caught up now. I'm going to, in light of everything that's been going on, especially my own just physical infirmity semester. I'm gonna, I don't know. We'll cut some slack if there's a few things kind of wrapping up. So we should look at any of those things that are going to potentially be problematic and see where we can cut you some slack. Okay. Sorry, just doing a quick adjustment. Okay, there we go. Is there any stuff as far as the stuff that's due on Canvas? Kicking anybody's butt or anything?
I wanted to.
Yeah, go ahead.
So about we have chapter 14 or part 14 due in 4 days, but it seems like there's just appendixes. I haven't looked at the assignment yet, but does that seem right?
Yes, but let's look. It seems like I'm just jumping on the thing here, and then let's pull the book up. It was it was like appendix leftover patterns was chapter 14 was appendix leftover patterns. That's okay. Here's the infamous, the old skater chick. But I just wanted to see if it was similarly organized here. But I don't have the other one just like super handy to pull up. Yeah, it was the same. Chapter 14 is leftover patterns, 617. That's what the previous edition looks like, and it's talks about the bridge pattern. I don't know how much stuff there is to do, which Tim should have already pulled that together. The bridge pattern, builder pattern. They're more. I think it's more kind of like review. You know what I mean? I think there's less. As I'm looking through it, it's less of the build a bunch of code and that kind of stuff. It looks like it to me.
If I'm remembering, I did a little while ago, but if I'm remembering right, the assignment on Canvas was just how much did you read question, since there was nothing actually coded.
I'm glancing through it. I don't see, it's like visitor pattern. Here's a scenario. Here's a solution. You can look at it. Here are the issues. the visitor drops by, blah, 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 benefits and drawbacks, you know. So I think it really is just read it. And that's more just kind of like, you know, review those other ones, Mediator, Memento. It's sort of like, you know, just the remnants of the Goff patterns kind of thing. So that should be pretty easy. Without, you know, there's not really a lot of direct accountability in terms of what you have to do, and you know, they're just little 2 pages per leftover pattern, so that should be pretty easy. Seems okay, right?
I saw looking in the book that that was left was the appendix, so I maybe should have double checked before asking that, but
Shame on you, Sam. No, it's good to clarify anyway. I'm typically, anytime there's a question like that, you're not the only one, right? And somebody else is like, what? But yeah. Okay, what we're doing today is kind of just wrapping up. We started talking about what I call patterns of leadership. This is really just to reinforce the idea that patterns are not just something that you build for software. I mean, I think you get that, right? We've talked a lot about where patterns came from with Alexander. I've asked you to talk about patterns that are like life hacks patterns, right? Make you write a pattern back then. You know, but there are, in fact, I don't have it right here, but our own Professor Neil Harrison and the famous Cope, Jim Copeland, that we had you read, you know, his, you know, 60-page libretto on patterns. They did this book that was called, it was about organizational patterns. And let me just pull it up real quick and I'll show you. Yeah, let me see. Yeah, here's the book. So that's Cope, you know, that you remember that. And there's Neil, that's her own department chair, Neil Harrison. And this book, for my money, is quite a good book. And when they talk about organizational patterns, well, this is organizational patterns of agile software development. In my opinion, I think Neil would agree. They're not all, you know, like agile, you know, or agile. You know what I mean? There's some of them that are literally just software development patterns. So, anyway, I recommend this one. But essentially, remember that a pattern is a solution to a problem in a context, right? That's what a pattern is. And the other thing with respect to patterns to keep in mind, these are things that I hope by now that this has penetrated, you know, that in all of my philosophical musings, that one thing, that a pattern is a solution to a problem in a certain context. Now, the context is forces, okay? Competing forces. That's the key, that there are competing forces. Remember alcoves, right? There's a competing force between the desire to be with everybody and the desire to be separated from everybody and with one person or yourself or 2 people or a small group, right? How do you bridge that? And the answer is, one solution is the alcove, which gets you, you know, both the feeling of connectedness and a feeling of privacy, right? Well, that's an example of, I think that's a really good example of competing forces. Well, and where there's no competing forces, you know, you don't need an innovative solution, right? You don't need a cool solution. Like, you know, if you're normal and healthy and you're just sitting wherever you are now, and your body needs oxygen. Therefore, your brain is already built to make your lungs breathe and take in air. You know, like there's no solution to that. But if you say, Humans need air, but sometimes humans need to go underwater for longer than they can withstand to be without taking a breath. Therefore, there are, that's the context. The competing forces are the need for oxygen, but the need to be where there is no oxygen, right? What's the solution? Could be snorkel gear. That doesn't really get you the down low thing. Could be scuba gear, right? Could be a diving bell. It could be a number of different things. But all of those solutions to that problem are patterns. Scuba tank, scuba gear is a pattern. It didn't have to be that way. And then there are also, like pearl divers that'll dive. I don't even know. Like, to me, this would be like an unspeakable career. But the ones, right, where they're like, how long do these guys go under? Like 5 minutes or something. They'll basically swim to the bottom of the ocean, grab oysters, and I don't know what they're doing, but they're getting pearls or something. I don't know how it works. I just know that uh, the thought of being underwater for, you know what I mean? The thought of just running out of breath underwater just terrifies me. But that is a solution, is that you practice lung expansion capacity or whatever until you can just extend the amount of time you're underwater. You get it, right? These are all just solutions to a problem in context that balance opposing forces. And when you find that balance, you get, you get somebody with scuba gear breathing underwater, or you get somebody sitting in an alcove in an otherwise broader connected area. Anyway, and then of course the software patterns are like that. But think about this from a perspective of leadership and management, which are not the same thing, right? They're not mutually exclusive, but they're not synonyms, right? One of the things, by the way, when we talk about leadership, I've heard people talk about, now there are leaders and there are managers. A leader does this, and it's a good thing, and a manager does this and it's a bad thing. And I think that's bullcrap. I just think that's kind of an intellectually lazy analysis. Reality is that there are aspects of management and there are aspects of leadership, and it would be ideal if they coincided in the same person, because there are both positive and negative elements of management, right? That makes sense? I mean, balancing the quarterly financial statements is something that someone's got to do. So that's a positive thing that is very much a management thing, and you wouldn't think of it as a leadership thing. That'd be very much a management thing, right? Having to figure out certain paperwork or make certain decisions about, I don't know, whatever, right? But those aren't bad. Those aren't negative. But you can also, get too caught up and do these negative things. Like, for example, a manager who thinks that, he or she has all this authority or is the smartest person in the room. These are like anti-patterns. These are negative patterns of negative behavior. But what they really are is a failure of leadership. So anyway, you know what I mean? They're not mutually exclusive terms or opposites of one another. Okay, that's really all I'm trying to say. There are leaders who are very bad managers, and that's not a great thing. And there are, great leaders who are bad managers, can't take care of the business side, and nobody gets their raise because she didn't file the paperwork. Well, that's no good. That's and similarly, there are really good managers who do the management things well, who are very bad leaders, bad at leadership. There are those that are bad at both. And what you want is to be great at both. That's what I think. Okay, now we started already quoting Phil Armour talking about how software is not a product, right? It's about acquiring knowledge made active. We did all that. I started talking about Jim McCarthy, and then I pulled up McCarthy's book to show you that Dynamics of Software Development, whatever the title is, and truly one of my favorite reads in the software engineering space. Really, really, truly one of, I think, the great undiscovered books in the field of software engineering is McCarthy's book, my opinion. But I want to just hit you with a couple of these, and where's my glasses? We've also just kind of FYI, we're on slide quattro, and there are 10 slides. So there's 7 slides of substance, okay, that I'm trying to get through. This is it. This is the end of the line for us. So check it out. This is really, really philosophical. Let me give this a read. It's also really complex, and I need to kind of break this one down a little bit. In my opinion, a leader's empathetic perception of the psychological state of his or team, okay, yeah, that's a typo, his or her team, is the beginning of what we call vision. So let me back this up. The leader's empathetic perception of the psychological state of his or her team. This is the beginning of what we call vision. Number 1, empathy. Remember all the discussions we had about use cases and the role of empathy in use cases? Remember that? You know, that was huge. That was absolutely huge. Because if you can't understand what the user's doing or what another coder is going to be doing when they have to suffer through your crappy code, right? That empathy becomes huge. Well, for the leader, manager/leader, it is to understand that in a development team, you're like a sports coach. In a development team, there is an emotional and psychological state of the team. That is a composite of the individuals on the team, but also, right, it's the aggregate of the individual personalities on the team, but also the collective, state of that group as it interacts together, right? That's kind of the key. So if the leader can then resonate with the team's complex emotional state. Now, again, to be non-leader would be to be a little bit like a bull in the china shop and just come rolling in and just trash all over that emotion, do things that are going to cause the emotional state to suffer, either of the group or of individuals, like for example, what would be an example? Having somebody who did something wrong and then like dressing them down in front of everybody as opposed to taking them aside, right? What's that going to do to the emotional state of everybody else? Even if it's somebody who needs to be, helped to understand something that was a problem that would need to change in order for their employment to continue to be a thing. Well, there's, ways of doing that would trash everything, kind of blow that vision or not. So identify with it, articulate it, and give the whole constellation of feeling and thought a visible, concrete reality in his or her own personal voice or gesture. In other words, if that can happen, if the leader can do that, identify and articulate and resonate with that emotional state of the team feels known, they feel understood, they feel appreciated, but even apart from all that, feeling known, I think, is actually a significant just principle of interpersonal relationship, okay? When the team feels like the manager gets what they're about, okay, the boundaries among the individual team members and between the team members and the leader will collapse. A wave of unity will wash over the entire community. And this is the other really important and interesting thing. There is this classic mistake in leadership. When that wave of unity hits, you know what happens to productivity? Goes up. There is a classic thing, and it relates a lot to the book / essay by Frederick Brooks called The Mythical Man Month. That was the name of the book. But the idea was that one of the ideas was that engineers and months were like interchangeable. You know, this project requires 7 pounds of engineer. Oh, there's 7 pounds of engineer. Like that's the same thing. The reality is that productivity varies dramatically between people, but productivity within a given person varies dramatically based upon a number of factors. And if the manager / leader is constantly creating weird disruptions and not understanding what it is like to be an engineer, what the needs of the cognitive, flow, for example, right? If someone's trashing flow all the time, you trash that, and pretty soon the engineers can no longer emotionally invest. So it's all about creating. There are just these patterns of how do you create an environment in which emotional investment, which is critical to the creation of intellectual product, can be kind of given life and or trashed, depending upon how the manager does that. And if you've got a manager who kind of is used to coming out of like an assembly line, whatever, picture a supervisor on the construction of the pyramids or something, cracking a whip, failing to understand that there's a tenuous and fragile process by which we convert emotion and intellect into software, which we can then sell to people or license to people. That's a weird process. And to manage it and to lead it, you have to just about be an amateur psychologist to do it really, really well. You have to master those patterns that really, at the end of the day, flow from psychology and from organizational behavior, and they flow from, management, psychology, and philosophy. Anyway, I love this quote. I have seen that wave of unity. One story for this slide. I was at a company, not to be named, but you've heard of it. I was a manager, and we had like a Nerf ball net that we had put up. It was my Nerf ball net. We put it up in the hallway between where these kind of cubes were. It was like, these were, they're like cube material, but you could either have like a cube that had low walls, right, and a window view, or you could have an office which had that same cube material but would go up, and then the last top would be plexiglass. So just picture like a hallway, but it's made out of like cube wall kind of material. In the hallway, we had the Nerf ball net, and we had evolved. We were going to play, wanted to play Pig. Somehow that game became evolved into a game called Puke, which was spelled P-U-K with a bar over the U, right, for the long vowel. So we had this game that we called Puke Ball, and then we created. It was like this kind of our little group culture, and then we began to create the rules of the game of Puke Ball. And then we had rules for the establishment, for the modification of the rules. Literally had meta level, like a constitution that would articulate how you could change the rules of the game, and then also how you could change the rules of the game. And it was hilarious because managing all the stupid rules of the game was part of the game. You know what I mean? It was like a game within a game, Inception Ball. And we were doing really great work at that time, I felt. And I felt like my team was just killing it. And we were. It is like Calvin Ball, except, Eric, that Calvin Ball can be modified on the fly and Puke Ball could not. The bylaws demanded a certain process before rules became, codified. Anyway, and during our breaks, we would go in the hallway and we would play Puke Ball. And it was really part of our my team's culture to play puke ball. And one day, I was a manager, and I had like, I don't know, half a dozen teams. But one day, my boss, who was a director, calls me in, and he says, the puke ball net has to come down. Now, I'm trying to do what McCarthy's talking about, right? As a manager, I'm trying to resonate with the emotion, with the psychological state of my team and their unity together, and and I feel like we've got this amazing thing going, and I know that if I go rolling back there and go, hey everybody, the pointy-haired boss says we have to take the puke ball net down, that all of the energy, or a chunk of the energy that was currently just flowing, would suddenly have to stop and turn its attention back to asking why. What's their problem? And then begin to feel like maybe my company is a bunch of idiots. Do I really want to be working here? This is really stupid. What else is arbitrary or stupid? You know what I mean? It's like he was willing to do this thing, and basically at some level trash the emotions of 25 engineers over something. And I wanted to get to the bottom of what the thing was. And I said, why? And he said, it's not professional. I said, so let me see if I understand this. Somebody up the chain, probably a vice president or an executive vice president, walked through and made a comment. How close am I? And he goes, yeah, that's what happened. So I'm like, and I don't know. I wasn't livid. I was a little bit livid. I was aghast. I was shocked. We weren't like, throwing beer bottles at each other, or something crazy like that. This is an engineering environment, I mean, and compared to, of course, what became the what do you want to call it? The vogue at places like Google, where you've got like gaming stations and slides to go from the one floor down to the next, and all those kinds of funky amenities that just make you feel like you're in a fun and creative place. And here we had just this one little Nerf ball net, and like, anyway, that was my impersonation of that kind of weird managerial philosophy. Anyway, so here's what I said to the pointy-haired boss. And this guy really was a pointy-haired boss. He exhibited a lot of the behaviors that you see in the pointy-haired boss in Dilbert. Lots of them. And a significant failure to understand this stuff right here. I looked at him, I noodled for a second, and I said, I will make you a deal. Because I was thinking to myself, what is the point? Is the point to look professional, which I even take issue with the idea that it didn't look professional, because there's a subjective definition of what it means to look quote unquote professional. But I thought to myself that the dumbest thing about the whole thing was that the productivity of the team was not considered in this entire recipe. Okay, and I get to the punchline. But back to Brooks, you can look at the team and say 25 people at X amount of dollars, therefore this many bodies cost me this much money. And that's just very much a two-dimensional, it's a simple multiplication, right? Bodies times average burden salary. What you don't consider is that there's actually a third dimension. So you've got this, nice little multiplication, right? Number of bodies, salaries, added up. But if you flip it and understand that there's a third dimension, which is productivity, what do you get, right? What do you get from having, from having spent that money? And that is entirely variable, okay? That is significantly variable. And what the number one thing you can do to affect that variable productivity? It's that. So here's what I said. I noodled for a second because I was trying to get to the part that what this really ought to be about is productivity, not so-called professionalism. And again, if it were something that was offensive to people, you know, uh, you know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? Things that were patently offensive or that were disruptive. If it's like it makes too much noise and that bothers other groups, or I mean, if it's simply appearance and not an actual inappropriateness, right? Anyway, so what I did, I looked at him and I said, I'll make you a deal. If you can look me in the eye, look me in the face, and tell me that we are not your most productive team in this department, I will take the puke ball net down. That's bold, but I also knew it was true. I mean, I knew that it was true. By any metric. And it was interesting because he sat there for a second, like noodling for, I don't know, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever, thinking. And then he just looks up a little bit defeated almost and goes, okay, you can keep the puke ball net up. That was the whole meeting. And then I got up and I left, you know? But I mean, so I won, you know, in the sense of making my point. But the reality is I shouldn't have to even be the most productive team. We shouldn't have to be the most productive team in order to have permission to build team unity through something that is costing nobody anything and which is giving everybody a feeling of belonging and teamwork and energizing. You know what I mean? True story. All right, here we go. Let's keep going. And again, questions, comments as we go, of course. Here we go. Control is another one. That's a big one that I think a lot of managers they lose track of what the goal is. The goal is not control. The goal is productivity. You're paying, and I've said this before in other classes, there's only one reason why a company should pay you a salary. Okay? And it is because their investment in you generates more money for them. That is just called fundamental capitalism. Okay? And the reason you take that position is because it's your best opportunity to put money in your pocket. But if I'm hiring you and taking a loss by doing it, then I'm not returning value to the shareholders for the money I'm investing. And then you're in a negative spiral, and eventually the company just dies and everybody loses their job. But one of the weirdest things I've seen when you're dealing with engineering work where the task is inherently about emotional and intellectual investment is this attempt to control. Okay? So here we go. Before the program manager can be worth anything to the team, he or she must be thoroughly disabused of the notion that he or she has any direct control. Huge, huge. You don't have any direct control because everybody else in your group is an individual that gets to think what they want to think. They get to do what they want to do. You can respond with raises or no raises, good raises or bad raises. You can fire people. You can do various things, but you cannot directly control the hearts and minds. Fortunately, in the healthy team, no one needs to take any special steps to see that this happens. The program manager's teammates will quickly disabuse him or her of any delusions of control he or she may be harboring, right? And that I think is also great. You know, if you're a healthy team and you get a new manager and the new manager comes rolling in and starts saying things that you really know are like not productive or not reasonable or whatever, you know, the team is just gonna, you know, look at the manager and just be like, yeah, so let's talk about that, you know? And a great team will respond with patience, but will stay true. Now they've also got to, as individuals, align themselves with the goals of the company, right, or the group, the team that is employing them. So that's still a thing. Okay. Okay, let's keep going. Again, more McCarthy. The rest of this is really McCarthy. The goal as far as authority, which relates to control. The goal as far as authority is concerned is to make every team member an authority, himself or herself. You want the team to have authority, both individually and collectively. That's where the manager's ultimate authority comes from. Again, it's a recognition that everybody on the team is an individual with their own internal sort of sacred agency, to think and to feel and to move and to act. And your job as a manager / leader is to help that to align, right? To help the things that somebody wants to do to align with the things that the company needs them to do. You cannot simply come in and say, you, Project X that everybody hates, you're on it, do it, right? You ever done that? I mean, you know how it is when you're trying to do homework, right? How many of you have done this one? You're doing homework, hate the class, hate the material, hate the teacher, hate the grading. Everything is just crap show in this class. And you have to sit down and do the homework. How easy or hard is it to learn in that environment? What are your experiences with that? I know you've had it. I know you've had the experience, right? We all have.
That's how I felt about the numerical analysis class that I was taking in the fall. It was all online, so there was 0 lecture, and there was like 12 plus hours of homework a week. That was just reading the book and doing it. And it was like, it wasn't the hardest math I've ever done, but it was still a high level math class, and that was like pulling teeth.
And the motivation just goes to suck, right? I mean, you're just like, you'd rather just, you're like, okay. In fact, I used to conceptualize with certain classes, since I did, a lot of college, right? I had 17 graduate courses in computer science. That's after my undergrad, right? And what I used to say that what I really wished that the university would do, this was, I think I said this when I was at Oregon State, but it's a pretty universal, and it's not picking on any school, right? It usually is centered around a certain professor or certain classes where the lectures are just horrible. But what I suggested we should do is have certain, like 2 sections of the same class. The traditional section where you come to class, maybe they take roll or whatever, you know what I mean? You listen to the lecture, whatever. The other class was what I call the beat me with a stick section. So in the beat me with a stick section, you got credit for attendance by going over to, an alternate room and for 5 minutes just getting caned, and then just going to teach yourself everything, In other words, if I could just get caned for 5 minutes, and I'm sure it's an exaggeration because I understand caning is not a really great thing, and I don't know what 5 minutes of caning would be like. But I'm trying to just say, you go into lecture, and you'd be in there for an hour, hour and a half, however long class was, and you'd walk out just like more confused than you started, more demoralized than you started, more demotivated, more brain clouded than when you started. Now you had to overcome all that bull crap just to go teach yourself the material anyway because you weren't being taught it by the professor. Right? Yeah, this is what you're talking about, really. I mean, Sam, except you didn't have the lecture to go, demoralize you. At least you could kind of start from scratch. But there is also that part where sometimes just the lecture itself or the professor's like, oh my gosh, and it would just get so frustrating, so brutal. But it's that same idea. It's that same principle, right? Anyway, this issue of authority is the idea that everybody is empowered. Here's one more example of this authority thing. You ever gone into a restaurant? Yep, yes, you have. And something happens. So just picture this. And again, comments would be great. And I was going somewhere, wasn't I? I was going to ask that question about, I was just trying to illustrate the notion that when the emotions are trashed, learning can't happen. And what is software development more than anything? As we've talked about it, it is learning. It is you're being paid to learn predominantly. So if trashing your emotions, like you've experienced in some classes, if trashing your emotions devastates your ability to learn, and software development is first and foremost a process of learning, what does trashing your emotions do to your potential to actually be productive as a software developer? You know what? Yeah, it makes it impossible. It just totally just squashes the productivity vector. And yet sometimes managers that don't understand these patterns, it's like they know what it costs because they know how many bodies and they know what they're paying for the bodies. They fail to understand that by doing the things they're doing that trash the emotions, you know, that they have this potential to just, devastate the productivity of the group. Okay. Now, when you're in a healthy environment, then this thing shows up. Okay. Authority vested in the individuals. Control happens when the manager either thinks that he's the smartest guy in the room. That's a problem. Okay. When I was a manager in industry, I always wanted to have half my team make more money than me when I was a line manager in a larger company, because I wanted to have really great engineers that were well compensated, who were smarter than me, more experienced than me, making better money than me, because I knew that they had to be the ones who were going to make these decisions in the moments. Okay. And the emotional buy-off is just huge. Okay, back up to the authority. You've been in a restaurant and something is wrong with your order. Just something happens, right? That, whatever. It always does happen. Like the server comes over and there's always somebody that comes rolling by and just goes, and the worst case is when they baby talk to you. So how's everything? And when you get that, you like already know that you can't really say it. You know what I mean? You can't really say what you're thinking. And you're like, well, actually the lettuce was kind of wilty, and the salad wasn't really very good, or these fries came kind of late and then they were really not fresh. They're kind of cold and stale. I mean, now when you how many of you dare to say it? I just want to know, if you wouldn't mind chatting that up. Are you the kind that'll say something, or 90% of the time, I'll just be like, I'll let them read my body language. Like if they're like, how's everything? And I'll be like, oh yeah, it's okay. It's okay. And if they don't follow up, then I know they didn't really care, Yeah, Blake.
I guess it depends. Sorry, there's a little echo there.
I don't hear it.
It kind of depends on what the thing is. Like, for example, in restaurants, unless it's pretty bad, I don't bring it up. But maybe like classes, though. I've had one class, like Intro to Computer Architecture, I think it was. And the professor started talking about computer pluses and crazy stuff, like on the first week.
10?
Sorry, what?
Is this like 2810, Blake?
That's 2810, yeah.
And they started talking about what? How long ago? This wasn't me, was it, Blake?
No, it wasn't you. And I won't name the professor.
But it's week 1 and they're talking about what?
So they're talking about like the bus and like different kind of stuff, like how the memories, how the data is moving through the different parts. And I'm there like, I want to learn how a circuit works. I want to learn how and or gates work. And they're going way deep. And then the professor just keeps going on and on and on. And I raised my hand and I just said, is anybody else getting this? Like, anybody? And there was one person in the back of the class that raised their hand and everyone else was just like me.
Yeah, no, you're right. So here's the key. I was just reading Eric's comment. Don't normally speak up. Worked in the service industry, and the amount of garbage they have to deal with that isn't under their control is ridiculous. Yeah, totally fair. Try to make their day easier, even if there's a major screw up. Yeah, well, and I think the key here, Eric, as well, is you can do it and be kind. You don't have to be a prick about it. You know what I mean? You can. There are some people that you'll see them like, oh my gosh, they fried, you know, and then they're like taking it out on the server. You know, that to me is inexcusable no matter what. You know what I mean? And even if it is the server's fault, you know, to me, right? 305. So those of you that are with me in 305G, you already know that like my political philosophy is radical civility. Well, it also happens to be my personal philosophy. If I'm there, I don't, like you're saying, Eric, I don't want to add to their burden, you know what I mean, and make their life worse, right? But there is a part where you're like, hey, I just wanted to let you know that, you know, that the salad was really nasty. And I would sometimes do something like, I figured the cook would want to know, right? You know what I mean? I'm not going off on the server. It's like, I just figured the chef would, you know, the cook would probably want to know. So just, you know, there's like, and then here's what's interesting. This is back to this issue of authority and empowerment. When you're in a restaurant, and you can tell immediately on the response to this what the management is like. And it's this pattern right here. If the individual goes, oh my gosh, hold on. Look, keep that. And I'm going to be right back with some, you're right. These, you know, I've even one time, I think, just said, man, these fries are just not super fresh. You know, I mean, is there any way to like, you know, whatever. And I remember the server was like, I think there was one time where the server just goes, may I? And I'm like, oh yeah. Like, you know, grabs a small one and, you know, like pops in and just goes, oh man, that's nasty. Yes, hold on. I'm going to be right back. It was like this real kind of connection, you know, and then dude like takes off, right? And then instead of like wandering the rest of the room and then 20 minutes later coming back around to me, like Beeline's in there and Beeline's back and he goes, these are hot out of the fryer and give that a shot. I'm like, crunch. I'm like, okay, oh, that's fantastic, right? I mean, dude just earned like a massive tip. Right? Because now, how did he do that? He had to have been empowered by upper management, by the manager of the restaurant, right? He had to have been empowered. And if I were the manager of a restaurant, it would be something like, if you see a problem, fix it. This is the same thing that happened that revolutionized Japanese assembly lines, was that any line worker on the assembly line could throw a switch, right? And stop the entire assembly line to fix the one. If they found a problem, they could stop the line to make that problem get fixed, right? That's empowerment. And I'm drawing a blank on the name of the, it'll come to me. The researcher, it was an American researcher and statistician that, anyway, it'll come to me. But no, as opposed to anything that they're doing where they're just like, oh man, I'm so sorry. Then there's two reactions again, two ends of a continuum. The one end, they might do something like, you know, they ask, but then when you say something, then they look like they're deer in the headlights because they're not empowered. They don't know what to do. They're like, what do you want me to do? Or do you want me to, whatever. But what's really empowered, when you can tell that they're empowered, is like the guy with the fries did, or sometimes they're just going to go, you know, he's going to say, oh man, I'm so sorry. Here's what I can do. I can do this or I can do that. Which one would you prefer? You know, you might say, no, you know what? It's not worth it. I just wanted to make sure that the chef knew. And then he's going to say, man, I really appreciate that. Then later on, maybe he comes rolling back and just drops a dessert on you and just goes, listen, would you please order a dessert? It's on the house. I just, want you to know that I appreciate your feedback and I'd like to get you dessert on the house. I'm just saying that when the server is empowered to make it right, then amazing things happen and all the lemons turn into lemonade. When the server is not empowered and the manager, they're like, I'll have to go talk to my manager about this, and then they go away. They're right. That's the opposite of this. And in a software environment, that again, it's that unity, that trust, that mutual respect has to be at play. Okay. Anyway, again, where these patterns exist, you see them everywhere. You see them in a lot of places. Okay. Here we go. Honesty. More McCarthy. Everything's McCarthy. The goal on a software development project is not to have the correct plan in advance. And let me just interject Dr. K's interjection on McCarthy. Because you can't. You cannot, right? I don't remember who said it. I don't know who it's attributed to. I think it might be attributed to Napoleon. It doesn't matter. But the statement is, no battle plan survives first contact with the enemy. In other words, put another way, if you make a business plan for your startup, we always joke whenever I've done startups, we always make our business plan, because you have to have that to show investors, that we always joke that, okay, well, we at least know for sure what isn't going to happen. You know that whatever you put in the business plan isn't going to be what ultimately is going to happen, okay? So it's not to have the correct plan in advance. I think you do the best you can, but to make the right decisions every day as things that were unknown become known, right? Knowledge acquisition again. You see how everything goes back to the orders of ignorance? If you've been pretending that you know, do you remember this discussion? If you've been pretending that you know something you don't, you won't be able to take advantage of the true information when it becomes known, because you're going to have to just keep defending your prior position. Otherwise, you're going to be shown to be a charlatan and a fraud and dishonest. You'll be left in the uncomfortable position of having been proven wrong by emergent information. Again, if you're comfortable with the orders of ignorance and with sort of embracing your ignorance, then new information, is kind of a thrill, right? Because you get to replace it with something true, something correct. Here's an example. I was working on a puzzle the other day with a friend of mine, and I discovered that this one piece, it's a very difficult puzzle, but I discovered that this one piece that looked like it fit didn't actually fit, had several other pieces on it. And I was like, no, look at this, And then she's like, oh man, I'm sorry, but what happened next was I discovered it because I was looking for a piece that seemed to like maybe be similar. I remove the piece that isn't where it belongs, slide it down, take the other piece of my hand. It fits, that one fits, and then that connects back into, some bigger thing. Okay, now, do we beat ourselves up because we were wrong about the first puzzle piece? That wasn't correct, and nothing was going to actually fit there. You know what I mean? There were no other pieces that were going to work as long as that wrong one was in place. Having figured out that it was wrong, all this progress happened. It's that embracing being wrong, being okay with being wrong. Big speech. I think I've probably given a bigger speech on that in 305G. Here we go. Relates to that one, integrity. We just got a couple left here. Integrity is about truth. The only thing harder than telling the truth is knowing the truth. I think that's profound. When all around me are confirming one another's fantasies and magically converting wishes to reality, when I have only the vaguest sensation that something is not quite right, when conventional wisdom and groupthink are strangling a new emergent reality being born in me, can I know and then tell my truth? This is very profound. This is very, very profound. Okay? Because honestly, discerning the truth is very difficult. Because we have so many preconceptions. There is groupthink. There's, do I want to be the one who says the thing that maybe is, I'm the new guy, right? We're always the new guy somewhere along the line, right? And one of the things I mentioned, that book by Neal and Cope, right, on the organizational patterns. One of the patterns in there is one that's called the wise fool. And I love the wise fool pattern, and I have used the wise fool pattern. The gist of it is that sometimes you need somebody who can simply ask the dumb question, right? Somebody who's willing to ask the dumb question. Because a lot of times in the dumb question, within the dumb question, lies the secret to the resolution of everything. You see what I mean? Sometimes the dumb question is where everything breaks, and so where the logjam happens. And I've also found that in any new situation, rather than feeling like, well, I'm the new guy, I can't say anything, I don't want to be stupid. The wise fool, being the new guy gives you permission to be the wise fool. Being the most junior member gives you permission to be the wise fool. So, for example, when you're new, you get to say questions like this. So, hey, if I can, I just wanted to ask, and I mean, I'm really new, and I'm sure that there's a reason why we do this one thing here. I mean, I've noticed that it's a thing. I've never seen it before, but I'm not saying that means anything. I'm just trying to understand, why we do that. I'm sure there must be some historical reason, right? And when you're the wise fool, a good chunk of the time, somebody will go, "Oh yeah, that's really great." First of all, if you're in an environment that disrespects you, then just go shop another job because they're a bunch of jerks, or the organization is just toxic or something. But so 9 times out of 10, they're going to deal with respect. They're going to go, "Oh, that's really a great question." So yeah, I know it seems a little goofy that we do that. Let me explain why that's been a thing. And they'll sometimes maybe say, it doesn't mean it has to stay that way. I don't know, but that's why we do it. Then you get to say, "Oh, okay, no, that makes perfect sense. I get that." But you raise a question. But I've had other times where you'll ask that question and somebody else will go, somebody senior will go, "Yeah, why do we do that? I've wondered the same thing." You're the wise fool. And I had one situation where an individual that I know very well was like the junior intern in a large organization in a room with 10 or 15 people up the chain of command and across, trying to make some decision about something, some interface issue on some smartphone app or something. And the individual in question, my friend, played the wise fool. And in that situation, he was like, same thing. "Hey, if I can," they were literally to the point of like, "Okay, I think we're about buttoned up." And then, are there any other questions or anything? And so my friend just said, "Yeah, I've just got one. It's just kind of nagging me. I'm just trying to understand, what is our core motivation?" And I know we've kind of made this sort of conclusion, but I haven't understood what's driving our motivation for how we make that decision. Is it this? Is it that? Is it another thing? I'm just, I'm really new and I'm just an intern. I'm just trying to understand for everything else I do, for example, what drives the motivation on these kinds of decisions? Very non-threatening, but articulate and striking at the heart. And then somebody's like, well, yeah, our motivation is X, and somebody else is going, I'm not sure that that's true. And then pretty soon somebody else starts talking about how the motivation impacts the decision they just almost made, and they began to drill all the way down in this meeting. The meeting then goes for another half hour, pivoting on this wise fool question. And then they get down and come to a resolve of their core motivation, which wasn't actually the same as what had been manifest in the decision they were about to make. And then it rippled back up. And when it was done, it was a different decision. And it was the one that my friend kind of felt like maybe, he didn't know for sure, but his inclination was that I think we're making a bad decision based upon bad assumptions. Let me ask a question about the assumptions. Not calling anybody out, not accusing anybody, not denigrating anybody, not being disrespectful, just asking the wise fool question that everything pivots on. So but I think it's difficult when you're in that position to sort of like know what's truth. What is truth? And therefore, all the things we've talked about with the orders of ignorance come to bear. Sorry, my lips hurt real bad. Okay, I'll live the next 15 minutes. Okay, let me go. I think this is the last, next to the last one. Emotion. In addition to calling for an understanding of the dynamics of the technology, fine, right? So it's about technology. Leadership in software development requires a high degree of sensitivity to the human nature of the enterprise. But isn't that the same as all that crap I kept talking about with respect to use cases? You know what I mean? Isn't that the human aspect? And all the fundamental reason behind patterns, the human aspect. A high degree of sensitivity to the human nature of the enterprise and awareness of the underlying drives and emotions that determine the team's behavior. Right? So much truth right there. Okay, this is the last one where he talks about developer burnout. It's also student burnout, which you're probably all experiencing by now, but developer burnout. The basic issue in developer burnout is that the individual's passion, that's the emotion, right? It's emotion and intellect. They have to combine. This passion is essential to producing great software, has been consumed or has become misdirected or is otherwise unavailable, right? The role of passion in software development can't be overstated. When the passion burns out, the compulsive interest, this last sentence, or portion of a sentence, the compulsive interest in pouring oneself into an invisible yet coherent and dynamic stream of bits goes with it. Now, you're a manager that is trying to be a leader, and you notice that productivity of a certain individual is really tanked, right? What do? You can go rail on them. You can mock them publicly. You can just ding them on their performance reviews and hope that works. But if you know your team, you might just know that, wow, Chuck is uncharacteristically unproductive. And now you've got an opportunity to go sit down. Chuck, what's going on, man? And then you got an opportunity, again, obviously there's certain professionalism, HR, what you can probe about, what you can, how personal you get. But there's an opportunity for the person to say, yeah, I've really been struggling. There's just things in our personal life and things like that. And they're really valuable. They were up here and now their performance is here. That's an opportunity to maybe do something like, do you need some time off? I mean, would that help? And they might just go, yeah, I'm confident it would, right? And they're like, but I don't know if I've got enough, vacation time accrued or whatever. There's an opportunity as a manager, again, if you're empowered to maybe do something like, you know what, just get out of here. Just go. We got it. We got your back. Go get yourself better. And maybe it's going to be a week or two, but just go and come on back, right? I mean, what's your best play? or fire the person and lose your investment in. I mean, I just think economically, that's your best play. Personally, of course. Emotionally, humanely, of course. But I also think capitalistically, also your best play. Because if they go get a true break for 2 weeks and they come back ready and then their productivity jumps 10x, what would you have rather had them do? Slog away in crap zone, then, draw salary until you fire them, then burn all the money to hire a new person. You already know they're great. They're just struggling right now. Some stuff happened. Their mom's sick. Their dog died, whatever. If you can get your head around some of that, the best economic play is this same thing of acknowledging and recognizing wherever and whenever that burnout hits. Okay. Also in ourselves, we have to be sometimes a little gentle with ourselves. We'll drive ourselves and pound and pound and pound. And one of the things that we used to do, that I used to do when I was at Novell, for example, we were right on a golf course there in Provo in East Bay. And we'd be creaming ourselves, right? Really, really pounding it. And then the product would ship, or we'd get to the other side of it. And then we would do what we referred to as falling off the end of the world, because you're done. And it's like, whoosh. When I was in school, at some point, I realized that I never wanted to do spring or summer classes. At Iowa and at BYU, it was fall and winter semesters, and then spring and summer terms, or even maybe just a summer term. But I never wanted to go to school in the summer, because I'd hit fall and I'd just be burned. I'd still be burned out, and then I couldn't throw myself in and learn anymore. So I needed to do that. But at Novell, we'd fall off the end of the world, and then we'd do something like come in at 9, work for a couple hours, 11 o'clock, we'd pile out for lunch, go over to the golf course, go play 9 holes, come back at 3. Am I cheating the company? After working 70 hours for 6 months, I would go with no. But there's going to be a commensurate downtime. When there's all that overtime, there's going to be commensurate downtime, undertime. There has to be. We're not, we're not machines, right? Varying degrees of personal, physical, emotional stamina to do that kind of work as well. But, anyway, so these are examples of leadership patterns. I didn't write them in pattern form. I don't give them fancy names. I could, but I haven't, right? But can you see how in every one of these things, there is the germ of an understanding of an idea about the solution to a problem in a certain context and balancing certain forces, right? What's the force here? You need your people to be productive, but sometimes they aren't because of burnout. Acknowledging that and the dynamics that underlie that gives you an opportunity to maybe act in a way that's going to give them a chance to overcome. And then actually, be productive for you again and worth the salary you're paying them, and then some, right? Okay, there we go. That's the book. That's the cover. I really do recommend it. 53 More Rules, AKA patterns. Okay. Let me see something. What about that? Yeah, this one was just kind of tacked on to the end of that, which is really just meant to say, we've got 6 minutes. We don't even have to spend it. If everybody's good, we're good, and that's fine. But this is, and we got Nico's as well, so there's an opportunity to throw any kind of like nagging questions you've got. I wanted to say earlier, Blake, I would love to, if you wouldn't mind DMing me. So with 2810, I'm the mentor for the course. So this kind of information, which will be, treated confidentially, right, is valuable for me to know, to understand. Kind of like what's working, what, you know what I mean? What's working, what's not working, who's not working. And that'll allow me to help make sure that kind of stupidity doesn't happen again.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd really appreciate it. Like, and we can also like delete the DM later to protect, any concerns. But no, is there any, in the next 5 minutes, any about anything involving the course, life, profession, anything? I want to say that on the health front, I'm actually at a point where I can sit in this chair for 8 hours. That's been, oh man, that's huge. That has been, it's unbelievable how difficult it is to just be productive when you literally can't just sit at your desk where you do all your work. It's brutal, absolutely brutal. Rick, let me see, Blake, I thought you went unmute for a second.
Yeah, I was going to say it out loud, but I've just been hearing a lot of my own mic feedback, so I thought I'd just type it instead.
That's cool. Rick said, is there anything you ran into during your career you'd advise us to avoid doing or getting involved with? To avoid? Man. I would say this, it's less avoid, but it's probably more do, honestly, Rick, is to recognize that companies go through life cycles, right? There's startup phase, there's young phase, there's growth phase, there's mid-sized company phase, there's large company phase, right? Big success. There's across the whole spectrum. So you recognize that when you join a company, including starting your own, which is joining a company. But when you join a company, you're joining a company that is at a certain point in its life cycle, in its lifetime. And it turns out that our own, it relates to these patterns really, but that our own personality, kind of our own brain function, personality, experiences, whatever, tend to leave us preferring one phase of life versus another. Some of you might be just totally jacked about startup land. You know how hard it is to succeed, but you want the big reward, or you just love that phase. Some of you are like, nope, going to the mothership. I'm going to go to the most stable employer that I can find in my state of choice, right? I want to go for a big company with hundreds of thousands of employees. That feels like security to me. And others are like, I want to be in a company about 500 people, growing but stable, or whatever. You know what I mean? Come to understand, number one, understand that those differences exist. And then come to understand where you like to live. I did startups in the 80s. Then I went to HP, which was a very big company. I was at HP for their 50th anniversary. Hundreds of thousands of employees. I felt that whatever I did there made no difference whatsoever. And for me, that eventually turned into, why should I get out of bed? Not quite that extreme, but emotionally, it was like, because I wasn't motivated to go to a big company that was stable just because I got to solve some puzzles during the day. I was always much more motivated by the vision and the goal of the overall organization. Went to Novell, and it was the hottest company in the industry. And for about 3 years, that was an absolute kick in the pants. And they were like 1,000 employees. They went to Oregon and became vice president of a company with 8 people, and we grew to like 12 or something, 15 or something. Grew revenues. It was very small, and that was the most fun. That probably was the most fun I've ever had in a professional setting. And I came to understand what phases of companies I just resonate with. and where I feel like I want to be in the org chart. So I think understanding that is a big thing. So I guess in short, what I would not do, Rick, is fail to understand that. Because a job is not a job is not a job. Let me hit the rest because we're about out of time. We can hit some of these also at Nico's. Tobias, would you recommend you go to grad school immediately? Is a bachelor sufficient? Is entirely subjective. Sufficient for what? You want to be a professor? No, it's not sufficient. You want to be a software developer? Totally sufficient. You have an internal desire deep in your gut to get a grad degree just because you want to, then no, it's not sufficient. You know what I mean? And the objective variables are just really dynamic. As far as and whether you should like go to work, then stop, and then go get your master's, and then go back to work, versus going straight through as soon as you're done. The bottom line for that is if you're burned out, you got to go to work. But it is nearly impossible, not impossible because I did it, but it's nearly impossible to get a real job, start making real money, and then quit that later to go get and then go be poor again. Right now, while you're poor and you don't know any better and you're eating frickin' ramen for every meal, it's a really good time to stay in the pocket and get whatever education you're going to get from an economic perspective. But if you're like, well, I'm like in my case, right? I'm married. I got a couple kids. I'm dying financially. I got to get out. Later on, I did my master's on the side, while working full time, which is not recommended. Later on, I quit a really good job to go with no income to then go get my PhD. Generally, not recommended. At age 34, not recommended. So I was pretty atypical, but that's a difficult question, Tobias. We can talk more about that. Tuition reimbursement, Eric, for masters is great. Just understand though that if a company is giving you time as well, now you've got a good deal going. If you're trying to do it totally on the side, that can be a burnout and a half. Just keep that in mind, okay? And Blake, starting my first full-time back-end development job this summer, finishing your degree very slowly for your last few classes over the next year. Totally get it. Learning a new framework that I'm unfamiliar with and will need to learn that. When you think about how much a person like me should spend outside of office time learning a new framework like this situation. My actual opinion of that matter, Blake, is that if you're salaried, that salaried means you're usually exempt from overtime, and it's not unreasonable under certain kinds of crunches to spend 50 hours a week during certain stretches when you're in crunch mode, 60. So I don't think it would be wrong to spend more time than 40 for a period of time, but I wouldn't make, I think if you view your entire job as being strictly contained within 40 hours, that non-flexibility may hurt your career. And you might be like, well, that's okay. I'm okay with my career being hurt because that's important to me. Then that's a decision you got to make. And again, we can talk more at Nico's. How about, I think office time is a myth anyway in the software industry, because some of the brilliant ideas you're going to have are going to be while you're sleeping, while you're in the shower, while you're on your commute. So the notion of office time, when you're doing intellectual work and your job is to learn, that's an elusive idea. Rick, being single, I think, definitely frees up the old schedule. When I did my master's, I had 4 kids full-time during a product release crunch at Novell. There was like 6 months of 60 hours a week, and then doing my master's degree, 2 grad courses at the same time, again, with 4 kids, and then like church service going on, volunteer kinds of stuff. So that was a little intense. Did that for 2 years. Took summers off. Always took summers off to try to do a little bit of repair. Okay. I think we're done. We shall see each other at 2:30 at Nicola Italia Pizzeria in Provo, where I will fulfill and make good on my promise coming back from the midterm. And then I'll let you know later, like what we're doing down the stretch for, second exam or whatever. We'll figure it all out. Just rest assured that I'll be optimizing to my own convenience as part of the equation, which will spell really good for you when the dust settles. So, okay. All right, everybody. See you on Wednesday.